Hi, I'm Robin McNicholas from Marshmallow Laser Feast. I'm co-founder and creative director there. We're interested in the multi-sensory, and what we've been doing recently is making installations, interactive experiences, artworks that are hugely collaborative, and yeah, we've been dabbling in all kinds of things, VR, AR, and lots of physical things as well. That's what I'm going to be talking about.
Hey, yeah. Hi. It's nice to be here, and thank you very much. It's a long time since I've been at a Glug. 3 years, it seems. I'm going to set a quick timer, just so we're on track. I'll take you through our adventures. Essentially, we're based in Hackney Wick. We're a small creative studio. We started a long time ago now, and I'm going to talk through with music, it seems. We've been exploring all kinds of interactive areas. Yeah, sometimes lighting, sometimes lasers, sometimes physical stuff. Mostly using and collaborating with creative coders, as well as a network of friends that we've met at events like this, really. The work has spanned kind of live productions with bands. It's gone into VR most recently, but we do lots of robotics stuff these days, as well as a combination, really, of baked CGI and real-time CGI as well, such as this tree hugger project. And what we try and do is balance the self-initiated stuff with the commercial stuff. Very much like the brilliant presentation earlier. That was my friend Barney's dad. We studied a range of things. I personally studied film and television, but realised halfway through doing the Marshmallow Laser Feast thing that, in fact, we've been catering for the physical space, so pulling stuff out of the rectangle and into the live environment. And it's a space that's celebrating the convergent industries. Conveniently, there's this experiential market that's just landed where we're walking with people and saying, yes, that's it. We're part of the experiential scene, and it's served us really nicely because we're just curious. And what's magnificent is we got caught up in that early Flash scene, and it's taken us on all kinds of adventures, and I'll just share with you a few that have got a focus on this emerging, not yet there, multi-sensory opportunity to serve the experiential realm. And this was our first foray into taste, as well as thinking about set and theatre and interactive lighting. So Laserface was the first thing. Laserface was presented just round the corner from here in one of the railway tunnels, and we designed a whopping great big marshmallow, a delicious, well-sourced in terms of the ingredients marshmallow, but its purpose was to create gurning, in that it was massive, and visitors were invited to sit on a chair. They were greeted by a range of people that stuffed these marshmallows in people's gobs. And when they chewed, not only were they bedazzled by the delicious, they were very tasty. The event was on for a few days, so it kind of went downhill a wee bit and started to sink towards the end. And they were more like Scotch pancakes by the end of it. But that's by the by. If you'd have arrived on the first day, it was delightful. And what happened was, people chewed, and we tracked people's faces and converted the chewing motion into laser beams and music. And so what happened was, people had this railway tunnel with their own face extended, and basically they were creating their own private performance. Hugely inefficient. 10 people probably saw it each day. But that's because it was so good. And I'll skip through a wee bit, but it was washed down with a squirt of vodka. So it was really playful for us, and it was an avenue that we went down where we were like, yeah, this is the right path. And then we got distracted with something else. Here's just a few other videos. the thing that we got distracted with was photogrammetry. We use all kinds of different image making techniques, photogrammetry being one of them, and in this case we worked with Analog, who are based in Clerkenwell, and they're brilliant 3D designers. They do lots of really high-end Maya stuff. And what we were interested in was creating a 3D asset that we could explore in virtual reality, because it was at a time when VR was full-on zeitgeist, like everybody was excited about it. And what we decided to do was get a high-end scan, a really detailed scan with lots of resolution, incredible resolution, to create a landscape out of a portrait that people could walk in and around. And again, like using photogrammetry, it's used in the games industry a lot. It's used in people here have probably used it, and it's quite extraordinary in that you can create these brilliant bed sheets. That was out of this project. That was the main thing, really. The dream to wake up with Beryl unwrapped on your crutch. But essentially, when we created this project, I won't show you it because what we moved on to was exploring research, and R&D is hugely important to us, and we're fortunate enough with the production team in-house that they are facilitating a heck of a lot of essentially clever producing in terms of channeling funds to allow us to really drill down and explore ideas. And in this case, we took Beryl and various other, we were using a forensic scanner to take portraits, and we worked with Bath Uni to create, with mesh analysis, we take a neutral scan. This sounds well, it is really geeky. A neutral scan, so a portrait of somebody just sitting normally, and then through a whole bunch of mesh comparisons, it would approximate the facial expressions, and that meant that we could puppeteer the characters, albeit with, at this stage, an uncanny valley. The uncanny valley being, if you notice Gerardo in this case as teeth, you can read that this is in fact a computer simulation. But it just shows you a hint. This was a couple of years ago as well. It showed us this hint of like, geez, this is going places in terms of a real-time exploration and thinking about how in the future we're going to be able to use this and bring characters to life in virtual environments. And what we ended up doing in this case was creating a VR, it was for a photo museum, and you'd in the real world there were just plinths, but in the virtual world if you saw heads on plinths, and when people put their own head actually over the plinth, the environment we used lidar scanners to scan environments, and they burst into life and created virtual environments so you could walk around. Lots of geeky volumetric capture stuff. Let me think about the multisensory angle that we've taken here. One thing that we've experimented with Beryl is bringing her back into the physical space and thinking about the textures and how, when dealing with somebody blindfolded in virtual reality, the texture and how sensitive human beings are, audiences are, to informing the narrative based on when they reach out and touch something. If it's cold and marble, then it's certainly one thing. If it's warm and fuzzy, another. If it's hot and sweaty, something else too. And that's one of the most fascinating things about our developments is like, geez, we've got to think about that a lot. And we enjoy exploring the way in which we can have texture tracks that run alongside scent, tracks that run alongside audio-visual tracks as well. And it lets us, in a non-linear context, think about how this is expressed in space as well. And this is all part of this whole experiential R&D and exploration. And again, what I enjoy about our industry, as opposed to, say, the film industry, is that the projects are iterative and they can be syndicated. And so we've started making story worlds and using laptops, VR headsets, AR headsets, projection and so on, to be windows into story worlds. And that means that once we've gone to the great effort of making a 3D scan of Beryl, for example, or a different environment and brought it to life with animation, it means that we can roll it out in very different settings based on opportunities and based on our own interests as well, and trying to create revenue, tour the work in terms of installations, but also apps and what have you. So in this case, we worked with Ron Arad for the curtain call, where a VR piece was translated to a cylindrical screen that you could walk round and in. We made a full dome, and in this case, there's a processional VR experience. It's in the gallery, as well as in forests as well. And there's something that excites us about VR is that there's a kind of theatrical performative element with the characters that people become when you design the clothes that your VR users adorn. And it's really quite enjoyable thinking about the theatrical process as we go. This is the thing. It's currently in Montreal. But another exciting development, as you probably are aware of, is that mobility. So this tethered to a blooming computer with a VR headset is a thing of the past in terms of being able to walk around now. And that creative opportunity is huge for storytelling. We've made various physical interfaces where you stick your head in. There's various, in this case we made a scent track that, in honesty, was a wee bit synthetic, which was, it exposed us to how savvy the sense of smell is, but also how quickly human beings can identify a synthetic smell of a forest floor, for example. There were times when we were saying we could be better off just sellotaping a magic tree to the front of this headset. It took us ages to make this thing. 24 cents in there and these little micro valves pumping different smells in. But it also exposed an interesting user reaction in terms of, in the experiential world, we have to be sensitive to each individual user. Kids, for example, they have so much more sensitivity to smell. And we've been using subpacks as well. The sooner those wires, the sooner we can hide all that grotesque plastic technology, the better. And yes, we would opt for pills that could bypass all of that. So it leads on to this next project, which is essentially a long-term. It's been 2 years now, 4 years since we first came up with it. It's called Sweet Dreams. And it is an exploration, again, furthering our adventures with taste, but not necessarily bringing it as a VR dining experience as the first thing. We're still very conscious about it being story-led. There's huge risks and failures that we'll probably encounter whilst dabbling with this. Another obvious but important observation is that people are self-conscious when they're blindfolded, and their confidence to eat in VR, for example, is a tricky one. And I was chatting about this in a similar scenario to this when it gets a bit more relaxed and social, with a professor, and I was quizzing him. I knew he was a mocap expert, and I was grilling him. He was from Bath Uni and had done our face algorithm stuff, and I was like, can you track candy floss? We really want to track candy floss. And he was like, PhD in that, mate, PhD. And cut to now, and we have Catherine, our PhD student, studying just that, and it's great. But actually, it's exposing loads of curious things that we can reapply, hopefully, and retire on, which is the tracking deformable objects and using AI to inform and predict tracking things. So at the moment, we have a really geeky setup. These are some hands that we've been developing with PressTube, who's, if there's anyone old enough, he's one of the early Flash gurus that is a collaborator, and he does lots. He's the first person that from my perspective, brought hand-drawn animation to the internet when Flash first emerged. He's great.
Is he still working?
No, Unity. But he's still doing lots of hand-drawn stop-motion stuff, and it's great. We brought this challenge of him sculpting these hands in Oculus Medium, and this is some of the really heavy geek stuff that's going on at Bath Uni at the moment, where there's an array of depth cameras. That the whole thing is that real-time motion capture, you know, the whole ping pong ball suit stuff with Andy Serkis doing the cartwheels and being King Kong and so on. Well, the next adventure is markerless capture, because computers are getting really quick and because tracking is improving and all this pattern recognition and predictive clever stuff. What it means is we can train computers, train AI to go, I know that, it's candy floss. I know how it squidges like this. Candy floss doesn't, if you squidge it, it stays squidge. And training a computer to a kind of volumetric capture system to account for that is a tricky old thing. Similarly, if you've got like a sphere, all these different materials, there's a screen recording actually. These are just some of the kind of basic interactions of kind of jelly-like viscous stuff. This is a voice fruit from another project we did with PressTube called A Colossal Wave. But what we've started to do is give the physical properties to virtual elements that have a tangible physical pairing. So in this case, it's slightly gelatinous, and there's a permanently deformable bit up top there. But it does something quite different when you have that physical feedback as well, especially when it's deforming. Because usually you've got stuff that's rigid and oh, this is another voice fruit, just jiggling away. And our hope is, because in terms of the convergent movement, that we can use them as virtual bagpipes and things like that as well. So you can use generative sound to, essentially you sing these voice fruit into life, and then you can jiggle and filter them and perform with them. So it's this really obscure space to be playing in. There's just more. There's a whole stash. This is very tender, this one, actually. It's we're thinking if all fails, we might branch out into a completely different industry. But, and in the background, what we've been doing is doing all this like whacked out. I mean, I don't do it. I just about understand what these friends and experts have been dabbling in. But what we're doing is essentially machine learning. Pressing the AI button does not help at all. It's a blooming nightmare. It takes ages and ages. And in fact, all it is just speeding up a process of statistics, essentially. And so the more information an AI has, the better. And so we've got loads of synthetic data that's just chugging out. I'd see it as like just baking bread or something. We just stick it all in the oven and like feed that into the AI that then over time learns. It's like, oh, I get it. It's a rabbit made of viscous jelly. I know exactly what to do. And it reprojects the mesh onto it. And it's just extraordinary. This at the moment is how far we've got though, just to expose where really, like for us when we saw this, it's like, it works! Yes! But in reality, if we present this to the real world and say, what do you think? Huh? What do you think? AI behind this, you know, you would be better off with a puppeteer kind of jiggling and animating it and just jamming it in. But what it does do is expose the trajectory of where it's going. It's improving at this like alarming exponential rate, and it's all getting chip-based, and there's all this cloud AI stuff that's emerging that will mean that these kind of mega data sets will eventually really help. What we eventually will do is explore all the superpowers of VR, like you can eat glowing stuff, you can eat animated stuff, cognitive dissonance, playing with expectation is where we're interested. And so if you reach out and in terms of like multimodal flavor perception, there's once you kind of scratch the surface and start speaking to some of these neuroscience scientists and food experts, it's like, wow, there's some really compelling stuff. And so exploring and playing with expectations, if you see and hear something that appears to be sizzling hot, then what does that do narratively if it feels cold, or vice versa, or if it's a neutral medium? And then we're faced with all these other really fascinating factors, such as the Buber and Kiki effect, the way that our flavor perception works. If food is served on a Kiki-shaped plate, for example, it's perceived as more acidic. And so questions to us dealing with a spatial environment where that is a 3D interactive environment, how do we make a Kiki room? How does a Kiki room animate? If we just stick it full Kiki, where's our counterpoint? Where's the contrast? And what's our dialogue with the visitors? And it's just, for us, I'm very passionate about it, probably too emotional and overly connected to the work. However, it's curious, and it just keeps prompting more and more ideas and explorations for augmented settings. The idea is that once we've nailed food, we can then explore things like deformable organs for VR surgery that someone else can use, or tracking cloth for theatre, or expanding upon it. In reality, there's each specific avenue that we go down is very time consuming. This is just some heavily watermarked kind of explorations of just various shaders and textures and interactive stuff that we can. We're building a tool set to then work with a kitchen, a really exciting kitchen, to see if we can exploit it further and make it into eventually a turnkey experience that people can come and enjoy. Boink, and that's with old Heston and the Fat Duck team as the third thing, which is just extraordinary. And so the idea for Sweet Dreams, engaging with them, is to essentially ask the question, do people taste in their dreams? Which is a curious one that we're not that bothered about answering. It's more the pursuit of, it's more the pursuit. Thank you very much.